Hello and welcome back to Excellence. Actually, I'm one of your co-hosts, Clay Skipper, joined by Brad Stahlberg and Steve Magnus. Before we get into today's episode, which is a new type of episode we're trying out for the first time. There's going to be lots of goodies in here for you. Two quick announcements. One thing we have not yet acknowledged on the podcast, Brad Stahlberg's book, Way of Excellence, was a New York Times and USA Today best-selling book. So huge congratulations to Brad from the entire Growth Equation community. And thanks to the community for helping it become a best-selling book. For the other announcement, I'm going to kick it over to, have I mentioned, best-selling author, Brad Stahlberg.
So we as a podcast are beginning to take on sponsorship and advertising. And the reason for this is quite simple. We want to continue to make this podcast as good as possible, and we want to pay Clay. And Clay has been doing this with us as a labor of love for the past year and a half. Now, I want to really double click here because this was a very difficult conversation about taking on ad revenue and sponsorship. And at the heart of it is we want to remain completely independent and unbridled by conflicts of interest. And we don't want to peddle so much of the BS that is out there. So we are working with a partner where we are very clear about our values and what kinds of sponsors we will take and won't take. And I'm not going to list them because I don't want to get in trouble, but the first 6 partners that reached out to us, we turned down. Why? Because they are products that we don't use ourselves and we would never use, so we're not going to tell you to use them. So yes, we're taking on these sponsorships so we can pay Clay, but there's a second reason. We are only going to be speaking about services and products that we actually believe in and that we actually think have a purpose in your life. So hopefully you actually check some of these things out and you get benefit from them. So that's our spiel. And with that, let's get into today's show.
On today's show, we are trying a new format. This is something we're going to do more regularly. It's our monthly roundup. So you can think of it almost like show and tell. Steve, Brad, and I are each going to bring something that we found resonant or interesting during the month. It could be just something we've been working on in our life. It could be an article we read or a podcast we listened to. It could be an example of one of the principles we always talk about in the show, seen out in the wild, in the real world. It could be any of those things. We often pick a topic, talk about it formally. I think that's great. And it offers a lot of opportunity to learn. But hopefully this will give you a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain of what we're working on and what we're contemplating in our life. So without any further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Brad first because I think you've had the craziest whirlwind month because of your book tour and whatnot.
Yeah, let me give just a quick rundown of why the month was so chaotic, and particularly the launch week for the book, which came out on January 27th. And in short, the day that the book came out, it was out of stock at the 2 biggest book retailers in America, Amazon and bookshop.org. So imagine waking up on the day that you've worked so hard for, you've lined up all this publicity that's going out with links to your book, and then people go to click on those links to purchase the book, and it says temporarily out of stock. That's what happened with The Way of Excellence. The best guess that we have is that someone at Amazon or the Amazon algorithm and the bookshop.org algorithm, when all these pre-orders came in, it didn't pull through additional copies. So then launch day rolls around, or the day before launch day rolls around, and they don't have copies, but there's also this historic winter storm that totally rocks the East Coast and much of the Midwest. So the warehouse that the books were in was shut down due to snow. So they literally could not get a truck to the warehouse to ship the books from their warehouse to Amazon. So instead of a celebratory, joyous launch week, to be honest, it was probably the most stressed and anxious I've been in a very long time. You can imagine the relief when the numbers came in, and it turns out that so many people still ordered the book, which I'm so grateful about. It was an incredible high getting that news of hitting the New York Times bestseller list. My first call was my wife. My second call was my second wife, who is Steve. This is all preface for what I want to share and tell. So I woke up the next morning, a New York Times bestselling author, and I wrote the following in my journal, and I'm going to read it verbatim. After a decade of writing, I hit the New York Times bestseller list. It felt great. We ordered Thai noodles. I had a glass of wine. The next morning, I was back to work. Writing is still ridiculously hard. I coached 8U basketball that night. It's the best. The top of the mountain is narrow. all the life is on the sides.
Well, say a little bit more. I mean, for people who don't find that self-evident, what does that passage and what you reflected on suggest to you?
To me, it just suggests that like the top of the mountain is narrow. And I guess the top of the mountain was like the day I hit the list, and it was great. And I enjoyed the view and spent some time up there. But then it was just back to living my life, back to being on the sides of the mountain, trying to wake up the next morning and write, and still finding writing extremely hard. That's the side of the mountain. The real reward and the real celebration was actually coaching Theo's basketball team, because my brain totally forgets about being a writer and stress and pressure and sales numbers. And I just get to coach a bunch of kids having fun. The good stuff in life is the stuff that you live day in and day out. And the accomplishment and the achievement, like it did feel great. And we did everything we could to soak it up, but it's very ephemeral. And I think that a younger version of me, or a version of me that didn't spend so much time researching and reporting on this stuff, might have woken up and felt like really empty. I mean, I quote Ray Allen in my book saying, how after he won his first NBA championship, the next morning he woke up and he was so confused because he wasn't fulfilled. Whereas I woke up the next morning and instead of feeling empty, I just felt so grateful, and not necessarily grateful that the book hit the list, but just grateful for the life that I got to live that day, which was in many ways a very ordinary day for me.
Yeah, it's bringing to mind a few things for me. One is, I remember once interviewing the author Mark Manson not long after his book, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, went gangbusters. And he's like, the morning after I was a New York Times bestseller, I woke up, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, I was sitting around in my underwear eating cereal and being like, all right, this is what it's like being a New York Times bestseller. And it just goes to your point. Nothing substantive necessarily in your life changes. I really liked what you said about writing is still ridiculously hard. It reminds me of someone we all deeply admire, Wright Thompson, one of our greatest writers living right now. And he told me one time that every time he sits down to write, and he's been writing incredible stories for, I think, like 30 years now. He's like, I feel like I'm worried that I forgot how to write. And it just goes back to that idea of like, it doesn't necessarily make it any easier. And I think a lot of the people we look up to and like to emulate, these athletes or these performers or even the physicians or teachers or whatever, we can often think, wow, they must be effortless for them. But even for them, getting back to the work, it can still be a grind. And I find a lot of solace in that thought.
And I think the thing there is that when it does feel effortless, when you are in flow, when you have that moment where everything comes together, it's really easy to fool yourself into now it's going to get easier. And I saw this with so many athletes where they have that breakthrough race and they're like, I made it. And then they go into that next race often and they're like, okay, the last one, everyone felt easy and I ran this time. Now I'm going to run so much faster and it's still going to feel this way. And inevitably it sucks, is hard, and almost like slaps them in the face where it's like, no, it's always hard. And if you start thinking, because I achieved X, Y, Z, now it's going to come easy to me, like you're in for rude awakening. And you almost lose that edge a little bit. So I think, what comes to mind to me is not only how do we keep that edge slightly, but also how lucky we are to have achieved something relatively early. And even if we didn't hit like the gold standard, but achieve something relatively early and then realize that the end result, the top of the mountain, isn't the self-defining thing. I can imagine if you don't experience that until later in life, it's harder to kind of deal with that thing. Where if you realize early on the arrival fallacy is real and that's going to hit you, then you realize that you better have some other fuel behind you. You better enjoy the process, the climb, all of the things, the cliches that we all talk about and write about. Because if you don't, like that post-Olympic come down is going to hit you hard.
That's not to say that it wasn't incredible and I wasn't super stoked. Like I don't want to misrepresent how it felt. Like it did feel great. There's just not that much time up there. The next morning, it's back to work. And I don't think that that's a source of dismay or a downer. I actually think that's really empowering, because what it tells you is succeed or fail, what actually is going to make your life satisfying and fulfilling is how you spend your hours and days. And to the extent that we have some more agency over that than we do over results that are often outside of our control, that's actually a really empowering thing. Nothing about my life will change. Maybe I'll get a little bit more in speaking revenue or can charge a little bit more because of this little icon. But other than that, I don't know, nothing changes. And that's a good thing. All right, enough about me, enough about my book. Steve, what do you got?
Oh, I'm going to take us in a completely different direction.
We're talking about your 4x1200 repeat workout you did this weekend?
Surprisingly, I'm not going to talk about my running adventures pushing the stroller. I'm not even going to give you the quote I was pondering today, which is Olympic runner 4th place at the Olympics, Don Cardong, who said, "Without ice cream, there would be darkness and chaos." But instead, I'm going to dive into the world of AI. Don't turn away, listeners, because I think it's just mind-blowing stuff. Over the past week, I've created my own essentially custom Canva. I've got a database filled with thousands of my own tweets, Instagram posts, and then just yesterday had it search my computer for every research study PDF I've ever downloaded and then summarize them all, including the citation and the abstract, and put them in a database that is searchable. I created a RSS feed that essentially pulls out any new studies that are published in any of the top journals that are aligned with the interest of the things that I've read and emails me a report every Sunday so that I can stay up on stuff. And then just messing around, I created my own mental performance app for athletes that walks them through before, during, and after by feeding it a bunch of my own writing and stuff. And I got to tell you, it's good enough where I'm going to send it out to some of them. The point is this: I have zero idea how to code. Zero. I can't do it for the life of me. But AI has advanced enough where instead of search and chat, it's now your little personal assistant that can create essentially apps and tools for you to use. Where in the world this is headed, I have no idea. But to me, it feels like, and we were all very young when this occurred, but to me, it feels like it's kind of like the internet when it started and your parents were like, what is this thing? And you as like that teenager or junior high kid, in our case, like signed online and was like, holy crap, I can do all of these things. I can get on AOL Instant Messenger and now talk to my friends at home. And I think we're in that moment making another transition.
I got to get Brad's reaction to that because I feel like you and Brad are often on the opposite sides of the coin with AI.
Yeah, I haven't used AI in 4 months. I'm going to be completely left behind. But I did send Steve something. It was an article that I read that was moderately terrifying. But essentially, one of the big AI groups tried to test Claude for alignment. And Claude is one of these AIs. And alignment meaning like, does the AI represent humanity's best interests? And the test was inconclusive. And the reason the test was inconclusive is because Claude told the researchers, I know that you're trying to test to see if I'm aligned, and I know that you're measuring me, so I'm just going to tell you what you want to hear, but I'm not going to tell you what I really think.
So let me branch out on this. I think that's when I mean a transition point is like we're going to enter a transition point where everything is kind of magic. Meaning you're talking to AI and you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes.
No idea.
And that is both like terrifying and to some degree freeing, where like we've now democratized skill, where instead of having like the computer code to skill to utilize this, now the emphasis is on like idea and like, can you convert that idea into something usable in practice, which can be freeing and good. But it's also kind of terrifying that we're just not going to know how the magic occurred for most people to a large degree.
Something that I've heard from Kel Newport, who's more of an AI skeptic, good friend of the show, I saw Ben Affleck, I think it was on Joe Rogan interview, make a very similar point, which is that by definition, these large language models are taking what probabilistically is going to be like the next best thing. And in order to do that, they are taking information from everywhere and everything. So naturally, they're going to create something that is like fairly average and maybe even good, because the system trains itself to know what people respond to and what people don't. But it will never be great. And I'm curious, Steve and Clay, if you've paid attention to this, if you agree or disagree that AI will be able to take you from like bad or useless to good, but it will never do anything great.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think it depends on the context of what you're dealing with. So, for instance, if most writing, non-creative writing, is taking ideas and concepts that are already there and recombining them in a way that is useful. Like that's what our books are. Like we interview people, we read research, we combine it in a way for research. I think AI is going to be great at that. That's its skill, right? Will it be great at modern art? Probably not. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I think it depends on like the thing it's going to do. But like you can train them. You can give this. And good friend Dave Epstein, gave a good example. He was trying to get it to create a PowerPoint deck. And he said, once I gave it a template and said, here's one slide, then it killed it. So I think half of it is like the new frontier is like, what are you feeding the thing? If you just say, go write a article on this topic, it's probably going to be average. If you as the human is like, hey, go write this article, here's 50,000 words in my voice, here's 5 research studies I want you to include. It might not be great yet, but it's going to be pretty dang good. And I think it's going to get better and better if it has like the human directions and fed the right stuff.
Yeah, that tracks with my experience of it. I'm in between you and Brad. I use it pretty frequently. The way I think about this is like with AI, I just don't want it to do any of the thinking for me necessarily. Like in terms of writing, I don't want to be like, here's something I need to write it for me. But I do think it can be really helpful as almost an editor and be like, here's something I've written. Where's my logical reasoning not adding up? Or how am I not addressing the question or the topic? I think the way you used it, Steve, is really smart because I think in a lot of creation, there's necessary friction and unnecessary friction. And some of the necessary friction, I think a lot of people use AI to shortcut that. So you sit down to write a book or a song or, even just a great tweet, and you're like, this is difficult. I don't like looking at the blank page. Let me have AI do the thinking for me. Well, now you're shortcutting some of the necessary friction that like teaches you the skills to how to be good at writing. But if some of the unnecessary friction is, I don't want to come up with 300 quote cards for Twitter. I've already written books, right? Can I make that process of having to comb through all my books to get all this content and reduce that unnecessary friction to free up some energy to do the necessary friction of the hard writing? I think that's like a pretty cool and innovative use of AI.
I think you nailed it, Clay. And I think that's what it is. The way I like to think of it is like, if it's something you actually want to be good at and grow at, you got to struggle. You can't skip the workout, right?
Yeah.
But what you can do is make it easier to get to the workout feeling good, fresh, so you can nail the workout.
Yeah.
And I think in AI world, this is where I think it has a lot of benefit for people is you can literally use it in the way I've kind of come to think of it is like my second brain database that I can easily pull from. So if I'm writing that article, instead of me having to remember where 50 billion research studies are that I've gone through that might hit it, I can write the article and then, to your point, the edit, be like, hey, here's every study that I've downloaded, in researching this book. Go through them. Like, am I missing anything that like would be pertinent or boost this or like further make the point or what have you? No matter how meticulous you are in your process, like you forget things and you miss things. And I think that allows you to become a better writer, in our case, because you're spending more time on the page writing and figuring out how to utilize all the stuff you've collected. If you outsource all of it, you're probably going to be good, not great. If you utilize it to boost the main thing, well, keep doing the main thing. I think it's going to make you better at whatever it is you do.
I do think there's something to be said about personal experience. I mean, AI can't experience anything. To go back to the question of art and writing and maybe self-interestedly how it affects us, the best writing, right, is like, I had this experience. Let me zoom out from that and draw a lesson that is generalizable or universally applicable. And the AI can't do that, right? It can't give me, Brad, your perspective that you put into the way of excellence. It can't give me what Steve learned from his running career. So I think in that sense, that will always be a bit of a differentiator. I think a more complicated question is, is there a market? Does the market care for that, right? Like, I think we see in a lot of movies and pop culture, people, I'm being a little judgy here and a little bit cynical and snarky and elitist, but like, a lot of people don't want that. They just want Minions 5 or Marvel 18, right? And like, that's a little bit more of a scary proposition, but that goes back to what you said, Brad, which is like, we have to know what game we're playing and we have to have hope and faith that our community wants what we want and what we find quality. And I understand that was very elitist, and I'm sorry, but that's how I think about it.
I'm not sorry. I mean, we are about excellence and performance for serious people, and most people aren't serious. So that is what it is. Something that does concern me, based on what Steve said, and maybe Clay, where I think that you might have a blind spot, is doesn't this also just become a plagiarism machine? Like, what's to stop it from you feeding it, all my books, all George Saunders books, whatever, pick your favorite authors, and being like, write a book on this topic, combining the tone and the style of all these people. That is scary.
I mean, I think that's true. And I think that's like a small version of what already occurs to a degree. Like, look, after Atomic Habits comes out, how many Atomic Habits Part 2 are there, Not calling people out, but I think like people mimic stuff that sells. Now you can do that easier. But I think in all these situations, what occurs is there's always a level of humanness that sets things apart and that, stands out. And I think as we reach AI of everything, it shifts what people value to a degree. Because I think the human experience of I've been through this stands out. It's just going to be weird, guys. And I don't think anyone has any idea what direction weird means and what weird actually entails, but it's going to be weird. And probably the thing that scares me maybe some of the most is that like we probably need some guidance and guardrails on this stuff, but our political atmosphere is stuck in like the 19th century. So there's going to be none of that. So I don't know. It's just going to be weird for a while.
Well, in the spirit of keeping it weird, we can get to what I have to present today, which is, don't worry, not at all actually weird. Mine is just a very practical framework that I've been finding helpful as of late. Something I picked up from James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, which Steve just brought up. He was on the Farnham Street podcast with Shane Parrish, and I believe he picked this tool up from someone else. So I apologize that I don't remember where it was from. Doing a little plagiarism here, but his framework was he called ABZ, and the idea is basically A is where you are, Z is where you want to get to, and his point was you don't need to know the letters C through Y. You just need to know B. So A is where you are, Z is where you want to go, B is just the next best step you need to take. And this is helpful for me because I feel like a lot of times I get paralyzed being like, okay, I sort of have an idea where I want to go. I probably need to clarify that better. But even when I have a clear idea and I know where I am, if I'm honest, do an honest assessment of where I am, not where I want to be. And then I get paralyzed being like, I can't quite see the roadmap, right? I know I'm an A, I want to get to Z. What I get to B, where do I go from there to get to C to D? And so this idea of like figure out day 1 where you're at, figure out day, whatever it is, 100. Don't worry about days 3 through 99. Just do the next best thing. So that's been really helpful for me. I mean, to make it concrete, it helps me with my writing. It's like if I'm writing an article, I'm working on a story right now for Men's Health. I sort of know where it needs to go. I know where I'm at. And today I just need to write 200 words or 500 words on this, right? I don't need to necessarily have the whole outline, or that outline can change to get me from where I am to where I need to be. So A, B, Z, that's what's been helpful to me.
I love it. It brings to mind for me, like the law of attraction and manifesting and all that stuff that was very popular. I think about the law of action instead of the law of attraction. Like you want to attract whatever you want. Well, you got to act. You got to do some stuff. And that's what came to my mind as you were sharing A, B, Z. James Clear is just a pith man. God, that guy comes up with pithy things.
My mind on that goes towards famed, legendary track coach Bill Bowerman, who had the idea of date pace and goal pace. And he said, too many people worry about goal pace. You need to worry about your date pace. And then you just gradually get better and better and better on the workouts until magically one day your date pace becomes the goal pace. And I think that's kind of like what you're doing there, Clay, is you're saying here's this goal, here's Z, it feels overwhelming. How in the world am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to start where I'm at, and I'm going to do the workout today that helps me get a little closer. Then I'm going to show up tomorrow and do the workout that helps me get a little closer. And before you know it, it's all magically come together.
What's date pace?
Your pace right now, what you can run now.
I see.
So sorry.
Well, I thought you were talking about going out on a date.
No, man. God, you gotta learn your track lingo. What are you doing? Date pace and goal pace. So if you want to run a 4-minute mile, but today you can only run a 4:15 mile, guess what you do your intervals at? 4:15 pace. You don't do it at 4-minute pace because you're not there yet. You just try and gradually get there.
Yeah. I was thinking about mountain climbing, and I think that's alpine climbing, at least, is the perfect example of ABZ, because you know Z, it's the peak of the mountain, but you have no idea what's going to come up along the way. You have a loose plan, but nobody that climbs a big mountain according to plan. Stuff always happens. And you can sit there and try to do analysis paralysis forever and never get anywhere. So what you need to do is you need to understand, well, I'm going to set up my camp and what's the first pitch I need to climb, and then go from there.
There's a great quote from E.L. Doctorow, who's a writer. He says, writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. Just exactly what you're saying, Brad. To speak to another aspect of this, you wouldn't want to make the whole trip that way, right? It's better if you can see. And so it's not, if you know steps C through Y, fantastic. I'm not saying at least that you don't want that, but it's just in those cases where you're paralyzed and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but you do know the best next step. Just take that. That's how I found it helpful.
I love it. As they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, do the next right thing. As Wendell Berry famously said, don't worry about a road. I'm paraphrasing, but it's a path, not a road. And part of a path is you kind of have to figure it out as you go. So I think that there's a lot of truth to that, especially if you're someone that is an overthinker and likes to try to squeeze all the uncertainty out of something by having a plan. It's freeing to be able to say, I just need to know the next step in this plan and then pay close attention and adjust as I go.
There you go. Love it. All right. We got some insight into Brad's book experience, Steve's AI singularity, I don't know what you'd call it, trying to scale the mountain without a plan. But I hope
getting out of your own way.
Found something. Exactly. Getting out of your own way. Hopefully there's something there interesting, entertaining, maybe even useful or practical. If so, you've heard us say this before if you listen, but we harp on it because it's very important to us. And it's the best way you can support our work other than buying a copy of Brad's great New York Times, USA Today bestselling book, Way of Excellence. Please share the show with 1 or 2 or 3 other people who you think would enjoy the show, find it interesting, entertaining, or also useful like you. Thank you as always for listening. Thank you, Brad and Steve. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves and be excellent to one another.